Hello, everyone. I am so grateful to be in this space with you and want to share my gratitude to the LTX Fest for inviting me to join you in the festival and having a conversation. My name is Cristina Jimenez, and I am one of the co-founders of United We Dream and served the organization as its executive director for its first decade, just until recently. So I wanted to share with you, the power of storytelling and the power of people that look like me to have a voice and to use that voice to share their stories. Because I have found in the last years of my work as an advocate, as an activist, as someone who has been part of building a social movement in this country, that stories are really powerful. So I want to get started with sharing a little bit about myself. I was born in Ecuador, in Quito, in literally the middle of the world. And I was born into a working class family with not a lot of material things, but with a lot of love and a lot of dreams. My dad, Fausto, my mother, Ligia, gave everything that they could to make sure that their kids had a better life and opportunities that they did not have. My dad grew up homeless in the streets of Quito until he was a teen. And my mother came from a working class family that believed women were not worth the investment of a higher education, though she had big dreams about becoming a teacher one day. And because of many opportunities denied to them because of their class, because of the limited resources, or because of certain beliefs, particularly about gender and women, they wanted to make sure that, unlike them, their kids will be able to achieve their dreams, will be able to go to school and become whoever they wanted to be. But unfortunately, political and social conditions in Ecuador led to a very difficult financial crisis in the mid-1990s. And my parents found themselves without jobs for a really long time. They tried to find jobs. They tried the hardest that they could, but they just could not find any. And I remember the situation getting so bad that there were moments where my parents had to make choices about whether we will have money for food or whether we will have money to pay for school or our rent. And there just wasn't enough. And after struggling for many months, trying to find jobs, they realized that it was just not going to be possible. And in that moment, I remember my parents making the very difficult choice to leave everything behind in Ecuador, their families, their loved ones, everything they knew, and made the courageous choice to come to the United States, like many immigrants have throughout the history of our country, seeking a better life and hoping that here in this country, their children will be able to achieve their dreams. The dream of an education, the dream of not having to struggle for food or work or a shelter, and to pursue whatever we wanted to pursue. And even though I was so young, I was only 13 when we came to the United States and we landed in the beautiful city of New York. Those became my dreams. Those dreams that my parents had, I really held them close. And it was my dream too, to be able to pursue higher education, be the first one in my family to graduate from college, and be able to have a better life with my family. But more than anything, for me, it became important to honor the sacrifices that my parents were making. I saw how painful it was for them and for me to not know whether we will see our family members again, to not know what this new country had um, in store for us. But regardless of the unknowns and the uncertainty, they made this courageous choice. They sacrificed so much for a better life for their family. So it became a big goal of me to honor their sacrifices. And the way in which I found myself being able to do that was to do the best that I could in high school. So, many of you will totally resonate with this. I was trying to do my best learning English, and also joining community service activities, and trying to understand how to get into different courses and classes, and becoming just active in my high school. I joined the Key Club, I joined the yearbook club, and I was doing everything that I could to not only honor my parents' sacrifices, but also in this dream of being able to go to college. I wanted to be the strongest candidate for college that I could be. And I was doing everything I needed to do to become really a strong candidate for college. But in an 11th grade, when many of us start thinking about your SATs and preparing for that college application process, I had a college advisor that told me I couldn't go to college because I was undocumented. By now, many people ask, but did you know you were undocumented? And did you know what that meant? And my answer is that I knew immediately when I came to this country that because of my immigration status, because of the color of my skin, because of the accent that I had, and for being immigrants, we got treated differently in many places, whether that was a bank, whether that was the high school where I went to, or whether that was in the street. Like many people that look like me and my family, we've experienced some of the worst that this country has to offer. Racial profiling, work exploitation. My parents were often experiencing employers that will not pay them their wages because they were undocumented. And also fear of deportation all the time. Living with that fear that you can get caught, living with that fear that you may not see your dad or your mom when they went to work every morning. And I knew that and I experienced that. But I didn't know and I didn't think that my immigration status will also be an obstacle to access higher education. And when that happened, when that college advisor said to me, you cannot go to college because you're undocumented, my world just shattered. I remember feeling so nervous and so heartbroken. My hands were sweating, and I walked out of that office in tears. And I remember walking home and sharing with my mother what happened at school. And I said to Mom, I think that we're going to have to give up on this dream. I don't think I'll be able to go to college. I think that this is over. And I will never forget my courageous mom, mi mamá, se puso las manos en la cintura, and you probably have had moments with your moms too. And she looked at me straight in the eye and said, no te puedes dar por vencida. You cannot give up. This is not the moment to give up. We've sacrificed so much to be here, to get to this point, that there's no way that we're giving up. And then she did something that, was very smart for my mom to do. She told me that if I didn't go back to my high school and found someone else that could help me figure out how to go to college, that she will go to school herself and talk to the principal and talk to teachers and figure out a way. As you may imagine, as a teenager, I was terrified that my mom will show up to school and embarrass me. So I, said my clear option here was, yes, Mom, don't worry. I'm going to go to school and I am going to figure this out. Don't worry. You don't have to go. What I understood later in life is that experience with my mother not only was an experience that brought me a lot of courage to push and to seek answers and help in the midst of uncertainty, and in the midst of someone saying no to you, but also that she was helping me find my voice and helping me challenge institutions that are not doing their job in serving their communities. I have reflected on this, that was my first time that my mom basically pushed me to challenge the status quo and to challenge what institutions do, even though it could be creating injustices. And after that experience, I was able to find someone in my school, another teacher that helped me figure out a way to apply to the City University of New York in the city, and I was able to go to college. But then another hurdle came up right after 9/11, when we all know that terrorist attack was not only painful for the country and traumatic for the country, but that it also conflated immigration with national security and fighting terrorism in very dangerous ways for our country. Because all of a sudden, immigrants became suspects of being terrorists. And in New York City, I remember feeling with my family just so much fear of even taking the train, because right after the attack, police was empowered to ask anyone, to approach anyone, to search anyone's bags or purses. And we fear that we could get stopped and asked about our immigration status. So we went for like a whole week without even showing ourselves up to a train station to avoid being racially profiled by NYPD in New York. What I didn't know that was happening at the same time is that in the name of protecting the country from terrorism, there were many policies and many laws that were passing at the federal level, but also in the state of New York. After 9/11, New York decided to take away in-state tuition for undocumented students. What that meant is that for students like me who have grown up in New York, graduated from our state's high schools, that we were not seen by our education system as equal, that we were considered foreign or international students, and therefore our tuition will be quadrupled or what compared to what any other resident of the city of New York or the state of New York will have to pay for tuition. Now, as an undocumented person, I could not apply to financial aid. I could not apply for scholarships, and having to pay 4 times the price of tuition made it really impossible. It was really an obstacle for many of us to be able to pursue higher education. It was basically denying our right to pursue that dream. And in the midst of all of that, just like my mom had taught me to seek out support and help, I started reaching out to organizations that were working on this issue. And I was lucky to find state and community organizations that were advocating for the rights of students like me. And I remember one day reading the newspaper and finding that undocumented students in the state of New York were doing a fast, pushing the governor and the state to pass a law that would allow students like myself to pay equal tuition rates as any other resident of the state. And I said, those people are my people. I need to connect with them. I need to figure out a way to join this effort. And in that process, I was able to meet undocumented students in other CUNY schools, in other colleges of the city system, and allies, teachers, labor rights leaders that were fighting for this issue. And it was the power of the community and the advocacy that pushed the state 1 week before I started my first semester to pass a law that allows students like myself to pay the same tuition rates. So, that story, I'm sure, just inspires you to think about the possibilities of creating change when people come together and take action. But as a young undocumented person, I was not yet fully convinced. I was a little bit like just checking this out. Like, what does it mean to advocate for immigrants? What does it mean to speak for yourself? And when people used to tell me, like, please, like, can you share your story? I would be terrified. I was so terrified that for many years, I said that my name was Sandra and that I was from Costa Rica. And I did that because I needed to feel like I was protecting myself and my family from deportation, because I felt that coming out as undocumented could lead my family to be exposed, to be detained and deported. So those years were really scary, and I wasn't sure that I really wanted to speak out and fight for the rights and the dignity of my community and of my own family. But then one of the most scary things that can happen to immigrants happened to me. I received a call at 3 a.m. in the morning, and it was a friend of mine sharing with me that our mutual friend, Walter, had been detained by Border Patrol as he was traveling from New York to Chicago in an Amtrak train. He had been racially profiled by Border Patrol with other men of color and asked about his citizenship papers. He had been sleeping in the train as he was traveling when he was awakened by a Border Patrol officer with a flashlight in front of his face that asked him about his citizenship papers. Right in that moment, Walter was handcuffed, arrested, and detained. And the government issued an order of immediate deportation for Walter. Walter was a friend, the first undocumented friend that I met or that I made when I was in college. I had met him at one of the meetings that was trying to advocate for the rights of undocumented students. And I will always be in awe about his courage, about how he openly shared his story and spoke about being undocumented and spoke about the need for this country and for the state to change its laws. Inside of me, I always ask myself, how and where does he find that courage? And I admired him so much for that. Little did I know that Walter and I were to become really good friends. He was my first friend that helped me out, to figure out how to get a cell phone when you're undocumented and people ask you for a social security number, how to date when you are undocumented, how to find work when you're undocumented. I could not have survived without meeting Walter. And there I was getting this call letting me know that Walter was detained and could be deported, and I may not see him ever again. And that feeling of not knowing that you will see a loved one again was so terrifying and so heartbreaking that not only did I just broke into tears when I got the news, but I also got furious and enraged. This could not be happening to Walter. So immediately, many of us undocumented students in New York and across the country got together and started to advocate for Walter's right to stay here. And after making many phone calls, mobilizing members of Congress, people from his school, his teachers, his professors, leaders in faith communities, putting pressure on immigration authorities to allow Walter to stay here, we were able to release him. Walter was freed after 5 days of being in a jail with the uncertainty that he may be deported. But we were able to keep him here. So this story to me is so important to the shaping of my journey in this country and who I am as an undocumented person, as a Latina, as an immigrant, because it was that experience that really made me feel the power and the victories and the change that we can bring about when we come together, when we speak up, when we see injustice happening in front of us, and when we take action together. We were doing something completely unconventional. People thought we were crazy to be able to speak up, to share our stories, and to also demand that people like Walter will stay here. Many immigration lawyers and experts will say this cannot happen. But against conventional wisdom, we advocated for Walter, for ourselves. We came out as undocumented and unafraid. And we were able to stop Walter's deportation and Marie Gonzalez's deportation and Kamala Saheb's deportation, all of them which happened in a post 9/11 regime that was targeting immigrants for deportation and detention. And it was that experience of being able to see Walter again and reconnect after he had been in jail for 5 days, where I moved from a place of what I joke around saying, from a place of dating the movement and being involved in a movement for social justice to actually making a lifelong commitment. I moved from being uncertain that this may be what I want to do or where I should spend my time to truly committing to ensure that other people in our communities did not have to live with the fear that a loved one could be deported. That day, I made the commitment that no one should feel how Walter felt when he was awakened by a Border Patrol officer in that train and racially profiled, handcuffed, and put in jail. That day, I made a commitment that no other family should feel the way I felt when I received that phone call and feel the uncertainty that you may not see a loved one again. And it was that marked the beginning of a transformational journey for me, because I moved from a place of feeling so afraid and ashamed about being undocumented, about my roots as an immigrant, as a person from Ecuador, shame about the color of my skin, shame about my accent, to a place of empowerment, of finding my voice, of feeling like I am worthy of dignity and of a better life in this country. And we all are. And that was the turning point that created the space for people like Walter and myself to come together with other young people from across the country and really dream about, how do we want our community to be treated? How do we want our community to feel? And how do we ensure that our community in this country can live with dignity and thrive and accomplish their dreams. And that was the beginning of what became United We Dream. We truly believed that it was important and critical that people who were experiencing the pain and the injustice of detention, deportation, lack of access to healthcare and a college education, to be the ones that could come together and imagine what our lives could look like if we could create change. To imagine what we could do together to bring dignity and justice to our community. And we decided to create United We Dream in 2008 with the vision that it will be a space to empower young people like ourselves, where you could go from a place of feeling in shame and in fear to a place of feeling empowered and finding your voice and learning the tools for how you can defend and fight for your community. We wanted to create a space where thousands and thousands of young people will become a generation of change makers, of organizers, of community leaders, of people that could run for office one day, of people that would open businesses in our communities, and of people who be bringing their creativity and their innovations to our community. And more than anything, we wanted to create a cultural and a political revolution. A country where culturally treated immigrants as humans and value us as human beings and treated us as the human beings that we are, and a political system that reflected our needs and our values and what we needed for our communities to thrive. And so with that vision in mind, we wanted to build this movement. And we went about training hundreds and hundreds of young people in learning how to organize, how to be spokespeople, how to share their stories, and how to push for legislation and policy change at the local level and at the national level. One of the main campaigns that we engaged in became the DREAM Act, which was introduced in 2001 at the federal level. And it was a policy that would allow people like me at the time to get immigration status, so fix your immigration status, and also be able to get a pathway to citizenship, a pathway that would allow to apply for citizenship and therefore apply to college, being able to work, have access to healthcare, etc. And many of us came together to make sure that this law, this policy could become a law because we knew that states could have the power to allow some people like me and other undocumented students to go to college. But states had limited power to be able to fix the problem in a permanent way, to be able to provide a pathway to citizenship, not just for young people, but for our families. And in the midst of increased deportations, in the midst of Congress getting to an intensified debate of criminalizing immigrants even more, you may remember the mega marches of 2006 that happened as a result of a member of Congress, Senator Branner, that introduced a bill that will make it a crime to be an undocumented person in the US and will make it a crime to help anyone that was undocumented. In response and in a result of pushing back against those very criminalizing and punitive policies, this amazing movement of people in our communities took to the streets, and we were part of the most historical mega marches that we've seen in the immigrant and in the Latinx community in a long time. And those were the efforts that we were fighting. But every year, the DREAM Act, unfortunately, will not pass. Every year, we tried to do everything that we could, sharing our stories, talking to members of Congress, making phone calls, organizing our communities, and this bill will just not move forward. So we decided to create a bigger effort. organize young people to share their stories everywhere in the country, put pressure in members of Congress, and even go to Washington, D.C. And in 2010, we descended to Washington, D.C. in the hundreds and put pressure on members of Congress in the lame duck session of 2010 every single day to make sure that they voted on this bill. We were successful in that we pushed this bill to be voted. The House voted on the bill in a historic victory and approved it. And then it moved to the Senate. And in the Senate, the bill failed. The bill fell by 5 votes. It was a really painful failure for the DREAM Act not to pass that year, for us to have gotten so close, and for that bill to not be passed. But it was a moment that it strengthened our movement, that it gave us more resolve that we were on the right track, that we have built the pressure to move one of the most powerful bodies of leadership in our country, like the House of Representatives, to pass this law. And that we needed to keep going. But we also knew that it was going to be difficult to push Congress again to pass this bill. So we went to the drawing board and we strategized again. And we came up with a campaign that led to the victory of DACA, the Right to Dream campaign. We decided that President Obama had been a very vocal political leader for justice for immigrants, that he had talked about in his campaigns and in his promises, that he will want to pass legislations like the DREAM Act and immigration reform, and that he could do something. The political context and the context of our families is that we were experiencing more deportations, more immigration enforcement, more family separation, more detention, and no proactive solution to protect our families. So we decided to push the president and lead a campaign that was unwavering, and push the president, push members of Congress. We follow Obama everywhere to make sure that he knew our demand. And even though sometimes the White House will say, like, this is not possible to do, we work with our legal teams, with advocates and professors and experts on immigration law across the country, and we pushed the president to make what they called or thought to be impossible possible. Young, undocumented people share their stories. We held so many protests outside of the White House and even follow Obama everywhere he spoke. And after a relentless campaign of almost 2 years, Obama gave in. And he met our demand by creating the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program in 2012 that protected people like my own brother Jonathan from deportation and close to 1 million young people. That was the most delicious, precious victory that I felt in the movement. It was incredible that we had created United We Dream as a space where we can shed our fear, be true and authentic to who we were, and love ourselves and believe that we deserved dignity and respect and a life with dignity. And that we came together and took action and pushed the most powerful men in the world to meet our demand. And we created that historical change that became one of the most important policy changes in immigration history in the last 30 years in this country. With this historical victory, we knew that we couldn't stop. We knew many young people within our communities did not benefit because of the certain requirements of the DACA program. But we also knew that there was people in our communities, like my own parents, that were still undocumented, and we needed to fight for them and keep the fight up to make sure that we can protect all people in our community. But I want to share this story too, because you are in the field of tech. And I want to share with you how technology was so important, not only to make this victory possible, but to make the implementation of this victory possible. When we were organizing for DACA, it was through social media. It was through Facebook, through YouTube, that we were able to make the stories of undocumented young people viral. It was thanks to things like emails and being able to sign up online to be in touch with a community that allow us to organize more and more people across the country, even in places where we just didn't know that there were undocumented people, like South Dakota. And that was amazing to be able to bring young people from all across the country and build community and take action together. And when we won DACA, it was also technology that allowed us to communicate with millions and millions of people, to prepare them for how to apply for the DACA, for the community to understand what this program was about. So using all the social media channels and videos and community phone calls, and even legal reviews of your application via different digital platforms, that allowed us to help more than 40,000 young people to apply for the DACA program. And this was the work of only United We Dream. I know many people in different communities were involved in helping eligible DACA recipients apply for their DACA. But without technology, we would not have been able to have that reach. That technology, we would not have been able to empower our community with information, and to also fight back any people that wanted to scam them in their communities, but also be able to apply and to be able to get DACA. It was also through that implementation process that we realized, oh my God, there's this tsunami of people that want to join United We Dream, but we didn't have the data systems to be able to like bring people in and then be able to follow up with them. And I remember talking to different people with our team of organizers to figure out what would be the best platform to be able to do this. And you know what? We could not find a platform that would allow us to protect the information of DACA recipients in a way that was safe, because they were undocumented, but also to be able to engage with them and to track whether they were able to apply for their DACA, and that they will be able to have a system of support once they needed to apply for their renewal. So our team of organizers and immigrant young people who love tech came together to create Dream Connect. And Dream Connect became the platform that was built by undocumented young people that allow us to gather this information and be able to keep this community in touch and remind them of all of the things that they needed to keep in mind in their application process, as well as remembering their renewal time. And Dream Connect has become a foundational part of the technology that we use at United We Dream in terms of our data platforms and tools. But I wanted to share this because I wanted to just share as an example of the need that we have for technology in our movements, but more importantly, that when people directly impacted and that have the lived experience of some of the problems that we're trying to resolve, when they are centered, when they are part of the strategy, when they are part of coming up with the solutions, that's where the innovative breakthroughs are going to come through. Dream Connect did not exist before a group of undocumented young people who were also organizers came together to think about what was the system that we needed to support our communities. And with the help of many others in the field of technology, we put this together. So I wanted to share that because this is the beauty and the power and the magic and the breakthroughs and the innovations that get created when people who are closest to the pain or closest to the problem are the ones that are part of the solution making and part of the ideation process. Which takes me to something that, I hope that you also take away from our conversation today, which is that we need people from our communities, immigrants, people from Latin American backgrounds, to be in those rooms. DACA was not going to be able to be possible if it had not been for us pushing the president, in us thinking about the policy, being in those rooms with members of Congress and with President Obama himself, demanding what we deserve, but also explaining what the problem is from the experience of the person that is impacted by it. DACA was only possible because people directly impacted and closest to that pain of being undocumented and closest to that problem were the ones coming up with the strategies to solve the problem. And in the case of this data system and Dream Connect, it was the same thing. If it had not been for young undocumented people who understood what other young undocumented people felt and needed and what we needed to support them in the DACA application process, we had not come with innovative ideas and tools like Dream Connect, or even innovative ideas and helpful tools like Notifica, which is an app that we created in-house with United We Dream organizers that are fighting deportations every day. Notifica allows you to create a network that is safe, of people that you could alert when you need help, when ICE may be targeting you or your community or your family. And that was only possible because people closest to that problem and from the community were the ones coming with those ideas and those solutions. So as we're like in a very difficult moment in this country, a defining and consequential election this year, I want to remind you of the power of our voices, of the power that comes together when we take action as a community, of the power that we are creating when we take action together, and of the importance of having people that look like myself, that have our lived experience as immigrants, as people from the Latinx community, as brown and Black people, as women, as LGBTQ people, to be part of the decision making, to be part of the shaping of the solutions, to be part of the vision in institutions across the country, in our communities, and in our own governments, and in those corporate boardrooms, and in places where decisions are made about our lives. I like to remind people that nothing that is going to impact us and that it is about us should be done without us. We got to be in those rooms, and we got to take action to make sure that our voices are heard, that we get to shape that process and don't allow others to shape that process for ourselves. So as we think about this consequential moment, where many in our communities have lived the pain of family separation, where we have all been traumatized by the images of children being ripped away from their mother's arms and put in cages, when we have heard the horrific news of immigrant women being sterilized in detention camps against their own will across the country, when we are seeing the killings of Black people and no accountability, when we're seeing the racial targeting and the killing of people within the Latinx community, like it happened in El Paso. In this moment of so much pain that sometimes can feel overwhelming, I just want to remind you of the power of your voice and the power of your actions. And that when we collectively come together and take action and speak out, we can create change. And that is the power that we have this year. All of us have to show up to the polls. All of us have to mobilize our communities to show up to the polls and vote early and make the plans to vote. Because it is not just about a candidate. It's really about voting for the vision of the country that we want. A vision that embraces all of us and that believes that all people, regardless of race and immigration status and background and how we look like, deserve dignity and the ability to thrive, or do not. That's the choice. That's the choice that is in front of us. And that is the power that we collectively have to make a change this year. I am going to be voting for the very first time. After many years of being undocumented, I was able to become a citizen last year, after more than 20 years of living in this country. And I know that in order to protect my immigrant parents and my brother that has DACA and my immigrant community and people in our families that live in fear of deportation, I know that that's the only way that I could protect them. So remember the power of your voice, the power of us being in those rooms and shaping our democracy and shaping the corporate world and the business world and the creative world and the entertainment world. We have that power because we, mi gente, we are worthy. We are worthy of dignity. We are worthy of a better life. We are worthy of a world and a country that would support us and will enable us to thrive. And we need your ideas and your voices to make that happen. Muchas gracias. Adelante. And I look forward to continue building a better country for our comunidad, for our gente, and for everyone. Take care and enjoy the rest of the festival.